Welcome, everybody. We want to just say that this is a pretty big issue, right, fellas? The whole zero trust thing. I really appreciate you guys joining us. This is we've done this multiple times this year, and one of the biggest issues that we hear back from has to deal with the bias in facial presentation, because that's a big problem, and you guys have a potential solution for that, and that's why Resiliant is here to meet with all these folks. I cannot tell you how many different agencies are here. I think we got them all here, but there could have been a couple that popped in late. So if we don't have your agency, we apologize. We'll make it up to you next time, but just know we really appreciate you guys joining us. There's a lot of folks that are interested in this as a topic, and we appreciate you spending the time with us. We will have the session docs. That will be the briefing presentation, the presidential order, the ZTA technology stack, which is what you guys worked on along with another agency, right? Can you even name that agency? Is that possible? For the Zero Trust Technology Stack, we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
It would be the Department of Homeland Security.
Department of Homeland Security. There you go. And we have a bunch of folks from DHS here, as a matter of fact. If you've never been on a Zoom meeting before, I can't imagine that's the case anymore, but you can go up top and you can choose side by side, make it bigger, make it smaller, whatever you would like to see. It's up to you. And we always love the participation. Do we not, David and Charles?
Absolutely. We love
I love it. So if you have any information, especially if you have your favorite movie, most important question of the day, obviously, that can go into the chat. But if you have any questions, let's make sure we pop that. You can raise your hand, and we can also put it in the Q&A. And if you have something that you don't want everybody and their mother to see, you have the private dialogue to dmorris@resilient.com. And what you got? We'll make sure we get the handouts to you. And for this, before we get the handouts, we'll have the disclaimer, which is this is not endorsed by any agency. It's provided to you for informational purposes only. And this is not a commitment for anybody here from the government to purchase from any vendor, including Resiliant. So there you have it. So let's get to it. We always, like I said, we love the participation. Why in the world did you guys decide to get signed up for this particular briefing? Did you just gathering information, looking to solve a particular security issue? Are you in the hot seat for ZTA? We know that there's a bunch of folks on the hot seat because I looked at the folks that came in today. Are you in the proof of concept stage, or your boss made you come? And have you been here before? A whole bunch of folks have been here already, guys. So we appreciate you guys joining us again. We always love to have the conversation cooking. And we do absolutely want to make sure that we answer your questions. So make sure you do participate. And I'm going to pop open this next slide, because we're going to get right into it, fellas. So who's on the hot seat for the executive summary, David or Charles?
That's David.
That's David.
Okay.
All right. David Morris is here with Resilient. Tell us a little bit about Resilient real quick before we jump in this, and what's your role?
All right, so I'm a global chief revenue officer. I've got 30-year background in cybersecurity. I'm a cryptographer by training. I built crypto systems, also been involved heavily with threat intelligence and investigations, just all over the place. Mm-hmm. And what Resilient offers is what we call an end-to-end zero trust product solution, okay? And a very big piece of that is what we call identity credential access management. That's what government folks call it. If you go into the commercial sector, they call it IAM, identity access management. Pretty much the same thing, although there is this very subtle technical difference, and that is in the use of the word credential, which we'll get into. Charles will discuss later.
So a lot of this revolves around the presidential order 14028, right? So the idea of driving this down into the organizations, and it doesn't make anything easy, does it?
No, it doesn't. What I was surprised to find out as I was preparing for this is that order you're supposed to be on the path by 2022. I don't know if that's an end date or not.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any sort of, very hard to find out if there were going to be any repercussions, but it is a definite part of that presidential order 14028 encompasses many, many things, of which zero trust is one of them.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, the GSA has let out their own findings when it comes to biometrics. And they said that when it comes to facial recognition algorithms, there are some big problems. Yeah, there's liveness. There's a problem with liveness testing. You know, when you present a facial or any, pretty much when it comes to facial as opposed to other biometrics, liveness and bias. And liveness is it really you at that moment and doing it? And then the bias is, even if it is, when it comes to facial, a lot of solutions that use biometric, especially facial, can be biased, and not on purpose.
Right.
It's just a function of the algorithms that
Exactly.
they use, and they don't do well for certain sectors of society, dark colored complexion people, or people that are not in not in the test bed of how these algorithms were initially designed. And
that can
talk
include
about
age
that.
too, right? It's not just
It's age.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch
Gender,
of things.
Gender,
Gender.
race.
Mhm.
But
And-
it's also with, specifically with females who may be wearing hijabs. So
True.
able to take away that potential bias there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so there's 4 critical points here of failure that with this system. So or with at least the concept that we're trying to accomplish and solve, right?
Correct.
So and it goes to liveness. You mentioned that, and that's just essentially making sure that person is really a live person,
Right.
not just a screenshot of somebody
Or a deep fake.
or a deep fake. And that's becoming more and more an issue, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
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 So the whole concept, though, it has to deal with never trust and always verify. And that doesn't mean that we're not trustworthy individuals. You just want to make sure that the trustworthy individual is really the person that's there, right? Isn't that the whole idea?
Right. It's sort of like, don't crack and open the door until you know positively who's on the other side and you
Right.
verified that. Because once that door gets cracked, and I'm using an analogy or a metaphor here, into the network, hackers are very, very astute, very smart, and crafty individuals, and they'll take any opening, any attack vector, and they will worm their way through. It's just a simple fact.
And we see it happen all the time. And we
Yeah.
know about hacking and data breaches. We see it happening all the time. And that's one of the biggest problems with the government is not in the commercial sector. It has to do with dollars and cents, but with the government sector, it has to deal with your reputation, right? And making sure that everybody knows that their information is safe. So anything else you want to talk about with the vision or the next generation of digital identity? What does that mean?
So one of the things we've pioneered as we've gone to solve a lot of these challenges and opportunities, which is the liveness, the bias, and also I don't want to ignore the social engineering. If you're at all familiar with the art and practice of SIM swapping, those same techniques can be applied to an authentication tool, an IAM solution, and it's happened quite frequently. And the other issue that's cropping up, especially with biometric-based solutions, is personally identifiable information or personally identifiable financial information getting stored. Because when those vendors use that and grab that information to subsequently identify you after you've been onboarded, if any of that information is used, and it should be, if they're not doing it in a specific way and they get socially engineered, all that PII and PIFI data comes along with it. And that has happened.
Yep.
So those are two things. So when we talk about our next generation digital identity, and this is just, I'm now just talking about Resilient, we have something we call the ID NFT, which is like a non-fungible token, but it's geared only for identity. So we take a lot of that personal data, which Charles will speak about, and we hash it up. And we store it in a private blockchain. So even if you were to gain access to that blockchain, you know, hell, I'll give you access to it. You can't reverse engineer a hash. It's a one-time, I'll get a little geeky on you here. It's a one-way pad. It's a one-time function mathematically, meaning you can't, it goes one way. You take all the data you put into it, you hash it. You can't take a hash and then try to reverse engineer out, you know, my social security number, my driver's license, my social, you know, a whole bunch of things that could go into the creating of that hash. Okay. And that hash is unique to you. And that's, we've trademarked that, we patented that process, and we call that the ID NFT.
Which is one of the reasons why you're here is because it is a patented process that folks can understand, and then give it a pilot test to see if it works within their agency.
Sure,
the whole thing. So you have the ability to do that. So before we dive into any more into the details of what the racial bias piece is and the other bias, let's talk about what it means. So for the folks that are just getting their heads around zero trust, best they can, by the way, what does this mean for zero trust and the reason that it has to be end to end in order for it to work?
So we define zero trust in an end to end fashion, and that's based in large part about on the DHS working model for zero trust and the 7 pillars, which we'll show you in a second. But there are two. Think of zero trust as a coin with two sides. The first side is, can I prove you are who you are? Are you on the machine you're supposed to be on? And then, and I could get very granular on that. I could even say, and are you coming in from geographically from the right area at the right time of day? I mean, you can set all sorts of parameters. But once I've solved that problem, then the question is, well, what am I going to let you do? You know, what are you allowed to access? That's where the trust zones come in. What applications or services are you allowed to access? And and how long are you allowed to access them? And then furthermore, how do I protect those assets? Because now we're talking about critical assets that are in the cloud, okay, or they're out there, and you want to cloak them. That's an important part of zero trust that no one speaks about. I refer to that as the elephant in the room, and that is that it's great to offer, especially now that everything's distributed, it's in the cloud, and you've got remote workers. Now you've got these applications that are out there, they're all looking to access. How do I make sure that hackers can't just ping sweep it and find out that they're there and then go to town? So you must be able to cloak it so that only authorized users can even see it. Okay. And that's the two parts of an end-to-end zero trust as we define it.
So, and because you're looking at both ends, but so it's not just that you're making sure that the one side, like I am who I am, but I need to know that the government system that I'm accessing is also who it needs to be, right? It's not, it's
correct. And then there's a third part, which is, and that government system isn't that if it's very critical and it's got sensitive information, it's not being advertised to the world via the internet with an open port,
right?
Or an IP connection or what have you, that there's a way to lock it down and secure it or cloak it. And make it available only those. And that leads us to this.
Yeah, that leads us to this. And this is what we mentioned earlier, which is part of the handouts. And we'll make sure that we get those to you momentarily. I just want to make sure you have the right ones. But the zero trust capability, what are we looking at here? There's a whole lot of boxes.
I'll let Charles take this one apart.
This is the zero trust capability model that the government has put together, the Department of Homeland Security. And we've got seven major core pillars of Zero Trust. The first two fall into the IAM, ICAM model. The first piece being the user identification, dealing with access and key management, device and endpoint authorization, and ensuring that the right device is being able to enter into the network. Network environment, application workload, data, visibility and analytics, as well as automation and orchestration to be able to ensure what's going on through the network is being monitored and is enabling the systems people to be able to facilitate as easily as possible the various applications and components within the Zero Trust model that they are working with. What we are capable today, Resilient, Zero Trust, our core capabilities are outlined or highlighted in green. What we integrate with through our API capabilities is highlighted in gold or yellow, and what's on our roadmap for 2023 is highlighted there in purple.
Okay.
I think we have a question came in.
Yeah. So yeah, let's what do we got? If we're looking at assessing a system, for example, Exchange or Office 365, can we ask for the ZT for that particular system or application? That's a great question.
And I'll take a shot at this, and then Charlie, you could chime in. The answer is yes. And there are two ways you can do it, or or both. One is you could look to implement a strong IAM or ICAM solution on the front end. So those people who are accessing your Office 365 environment are absolutely positively verified and authenticated before they grant access. Okay. And that's easy to do. We do that, as a matter of fact. And then it depends on how you're hosting your Office 365 or Exchange in the cloud. You're probably not going to be able to put that in a trust zone, but if you're hosting it yourself, you could certainly wrap that envelop that in a trust zone. But at the very least, as part of Zero Trust, you could apply these first two pillars to an Office 365 implementation quite easily. We do it out of the box. We offer that as a feature. But Charlie, do you have anything with that?
I think you covered it perfectly. I think the our ability to be able to ensure that the truly authorized individual who we will verify at the moment of an attempt of being able to log in or access to Office 365 is truly that individual. And we'll be going through some examples later on to show you the level of activity, the level of detail required in order to be able to ensure we've truly identified the right individual.
Love it. And so that you have that as part of your handouts as well. Let's ask the folks, what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing? And if you have a different challenge than this, just pop it in the Q&A or in the comments or chat, and we'll make sure we get it. But understanding even what Zero Trust is, there's a lot of folks that are having trouble with that. Meeting the presidential memorandum, everybody should pick that. You can pick as many as you want. Making sure that you get the bias issue solved. If you're using facial recognition as part of that, and finding resources to help with implementation, because that's all part of the problem too. So,
Right.
So while they're answering this, how does it all start? And you mentioned IAM and ICAM. What are those again?
Identity access management, right, Charlie? And
Yes.
Identity credential access management. So you'll see in the private sector, and I'm kind of grinning here because I find it funny. They call it IAM, and the government calls it ICAM. I prefer ICAM. But if you go into a commercial, and we're talking some very sophisticated, large commercial customers, and you say ICAM, they're going to look at you and go, "Huh?" And it's and you just say IAM, and they're like, "Okay, great." ICAM is actually, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, a much stronger, more robust flavor of identity access management.
And since we're in the presence of a bunch of govies, you're probably going to get agreement.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
So there you go.
So
what take us through this.
So what we're talking about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Charlie, is today's session is we just want to focus on the first half of an end-to-end zero trust solution. So you remember that government, the 7 pillars that Charles walked you through. Today we're here to show you what the first 2 look like, what a solution looks like, what are the pitfalls around that, and how to avoid them. And this is where liveness and bias testing really comes home to roost and plays a role in terms of identifying the user, the end user device. And in our case, this is our implementation in terms of how we do it. People do it in different ways. We like the way we do it, obviously. We've spent a lot of time with this. We identify and credential a user. And once we do that, we store that via a hash. Charles will show you all this, into a private blockchain. And for subsequent, that's during the onboarding process. And then we compare hashes. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, which I'm about to do. So
this area over here is
that's all the cloaking of the application and the asset behind a gateway with a denial policy. And I believe you've covered this in other sessions. We could do a whole session on just that, that part of the equation. But those are the 2 parts. Remember the second slide I talked about there are 2. What is end-to-end zero trust? It's, do I know who you are? And then what are you allowed to do? What you circled in red is, okay, what are you allowed to do? The first part, what we're talking about today, is how do I know you are who you are? That's the ICAM per.
Yep. And we're gonna look at that and just say, so back to the Office 365, that's living in here, right?
So that would be living in there. And the real question is, so how do I provide strong authentication and verification, ICAM, so that when people come in to access an Office 365 environment, I really have a strong degree of confidence they are who they can claim to be. Because if that breaks, it all breaks. Well, Office 365 in particular, you're in deep trouble.
And you're behind this, you're behind this gateway, and you're playing in whatever the application is. It doesn't matter which application.
It could be a proprietary application. It depends. We talk a lot to government agencies, and they've got their own homegrown different applications.
I can't imagine that. Nobody here has anything homegrown.
Well, you'd be shocked.
I already know.
I know they're very sophisticated, right. Very sensitive applications.
Absolutely.
And some of them actually go to protecting the national infrastructure.
That's a fact. So we appreciate that. So take us on the onboarding. So before you even get started, you have to be onboarded.
Yeah.
And that includes starting to map who I am, right?
Yep.
And how does that work?
So the onboarding process is to truly ensure that we have identified the individual to be the proper individual that we can verify against a government document. The individual would download the Resiliant app and provide a government document. This can be a driver's license, a passport, a state ID, or even a government initiated document. And we support over 11,000 different government items within the database that we are able to evaluate the IDs against. The user will take a selfie, and they will validate that against the government ID, which, as I should have said, needs to or is required to have a picture. Once the validation process has been provided or been validated, a unique anonymous digital ID that we refer to as the ID NFT, which we have a trademark on, as well as a full patent. It's created locally. Dave talked about the level of hash that's created. And the only information that is stored locally is encrypted on the individual cell phone, so that is once we've created the ID NFT, we will upload that to the Resiliant private blockchain to be able to be used for subsequent access and authentication purposes.
We have a real quick question.
Yeah.
What assurance from William, what assurance level is a person verified to? Well, you want to elaborate that on a little bit, and we can unmute you if you want in a minute, but I just want to make sure that we get that answered.
I would say to a very high degree of assurance, because what we're doing is that 11,000, that database of 11,000 forms or credentials of ID range from driver's license, passports, and other forms of documents that we know are authentic. So when someone onboards and they present something to us, it's got to match in that database, and we test. As Charles will show in the demo, we test, like if I'm onboarding with the New Jersey driver's license, we know what a New Jersey driver's license consists of.
Mm-hmm.
We know how it's built. We know what it contains. We know what a forged one looks like. So the moment we detect a forgery, boom, you're out. You can't even onboard.
Right.
So that's a very high degree of confidence. And you can use different types of things to onboard with, different forms of ID and assign, and you can accept the level of risk you want.
And we'll expand on information assurance level as defined by CISA. That's what I was waiting for, William. So if we don't have that answer right now, we will have that answer for you. And that may be a cross reference that you guys have to do, David and Charles.
Sure.
And so, but you'll probably be able to answer that by the details of the onboarding process. Let me get rid of this.
Yeah, I think as soon as we go into this, I think a lot of people's questions are going to get cleared up.
Exactly. So,
go ahead, Charlie.
You don't have to read this whole thing, Charles, but because we handed it out to everybody. But you're welcome to highlight whatever you like.
I'm going to highlight the key components. Really, what is required from the user is really in steps 1, 2, and 3. They download the app from the Apple Store or the Google Play. They install the app on their phone. They take a picture of the government document on both sides. If it's a
driver's license
or a passport. If it's a passport and has a chip in it, we'll be able to read the data off the chip as well, and utilize that to ensure that we can test against any type of forgery. And then the other requirement for the user is to be able to take a selfie. Both liveness testing and bias mitigation is applied in this process. And we'll be getting into much more detail on both of those shortly. But the next activity is we compare the selfie to the government ID picture. We try to we ensure a positive verification. If we have a match, we know the individual attempting to be able to onboard is in fact truly the correct individual. We extract the UUID off of that cell phone, along with key characteristics of the document that was utilized, state, city, family name, and so forth. We take information regarding the picture that was taken. the geometry of the face, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the chin, the cheeks, and so forth. And we utilize all that information, run it through an algorithm to be able to create a very unique string, which is then hashed using SHA-256. This hash is known as an IDNFT that we've been talking about, and is stored in the private blockchain. It can be stored on our private blockchain, can be stored in your own private blockchain.
And this goes to what D Singh is saying. Can you expand on the only the anonymous biometric data shared?
Yeah. We're not storing ever your fingerprint, digital representation of your fingerprint or whatever. We're storing, we're taking that fingerprint or the picture, that selfie you're using, and we're hashing it. It's like one of many multiple things that we use, as Charlie said, in step 6 to create that IDNFT or the hash that we store on the blockchain.
And Raymond's asking about how can the chip be accessed with a simple picture by the user.
Okay,
RFID,
so
I
the cell
understand.
phone has the ability to be able to read the chip off of
Right.
the off of
Surprise!
yeah. And we also store the original document on the user's cell phone in an encrypted state, so we can go back and re-verify when somebody goes to access into a system again. And we recreate the IDNFT locally when that access is being performed in order to be able to ensure we have properly identified the individual attempting to try to onboard.
And then after you get onboarded, then you're going to test again for the liveliness, right? Is that what we're seeing?
You're testing for liveness and bias at time of onboarding, and then at time of authentication and access. So it happens on both parts of the process.
So you still know that you're you, right? That I'm me.
Well, we as the system provider know that it's accurate. There's no bias, and it's live, and it's not being a deep fake or someone trying to get over on us or fake out the system.
Love it.
So the authentication process, this has been after somebody has effectively been onboarded. The only step that's required for a user is step number 1, and that is to take that selfie again. That liveness testing and bias testing is applied. The process of the next 3 steps is recreating that local IDNFT, which will then be compared against the stored IDNFT that's in the private blockchain. And once we have a match on those 2 hashes, those 2 IDNFTs, will that user be allowed into the system? And we have a very high degree of being able to authenticate through this process users into systems. And hopefully, if anybody has any questions on this process, we can either take them now or certainly have follow-up.
Yeah, we'll definitely, because there's a couple of questions. So William's asking again, how does this compare to PIV or CAC? And it's next gen.
So if somebody steals a CAC card, they could be able to gain access into somebody's device and basically represent themselves as that individual. Our process always requiring a selfie of the individual, a biometric that we believe has the ability to be able to ensure that we are identifying the right individual to be able to gain access into critical systems.
At the moment that you're asking, that I'm asking. If I'm asking for it, you're checking to make sure I'm me and not just somebody who happened to be walking past my desk one day and pick up my CAC card, right?
Yeah, because a CAT card is secured by a 4-digit PIN.
Mm-hmm.
Not terribly hard to guess.
Mm-hmm.
There are actually, you go to darknet and there are programs that'll just run permutation after permutation until it hits it. We are talking to some government agencies that are saying, even if they're longer than 4 digits, I understand your point. It's still not a strong verification method.
Which is why we're looking at. This is why
we are talking to some
ZTA
government
exists.
agencies about augmenting what we do to a CAT card.
Right.
So, all right. So who's taking over?
Charlie.
David, you taking over?
No, Charles is.
Charles is taking over. All right, Charles, you're up.
Right.
And we will continue to answer the questions. Some of these questions are probably going to get technical because we have some real propeller heads here, by the
Sure.
way, that you guys can talk to, do your Vulcan mind melds, whatever it is you want to do. But at the end of the day, some of the things you're going to experience are going to be directly related to your agency and directly related to your job description within that. And before we put everybody into a coma from details, just know we can take some of these offline, and the whole objective is to have the conversation so that you can start to test to see if this works for you in your environment. So you ready to roll there?
Yeah.
There it is.
So this portion is recorded, but I think you'll understand. I don't want to overwrite my original ID and FT, so I'm using a recording of one that's already been done. Here, this is an example of the cell phone of somebody. This is what you would see. You get to be able to choose on that whether you want to be able to onboard with a government ID, a driver's license, a passport, or other type of document.
So this is strictly the onboarding process that we're going to show.
And here we select passport. We put the document in front of the camera, and we just wait until the border turns green. We then hold the camera towards the government document, and we're able to read the RFID chip. Reading process is finished. We then, as part of the process, take a selfie, and the individual will take that picture. You could be wearing glasses or not glasses.
You can have a bad hair day and everything. Doesn't matter your hair day. Just kidding.
Yeah, that was Dave
Yeah.
without a mustache. But as you can see, the processing takes place, and then once it's processed, it tells you that the document's been safely stored in a vault on that cell phone, encrypted. All right. Here, somebody is entering their email address. As you can see, the push is being sent to the cell phone. The cell phone is requesting a facial recognition. The person selected that. They take the selfie. As you can see in that particular picture, he was wearing glasses, where his onboarding he did not have. We've been identified properly, and the person is then allowed into the access area that he was attempting to try to gain access to.
Before you even access the system itself, right? So you need to make sure that you're IDing me, for instance, right?
Mhm.
And that I'm live.
Mhm.
And then you're going to go into, all right, now that you know that I'm me and I know that you're you, then I have the ability to get to the systems. But there's a complete separation before that gap is bridged, right?
Right.
Tell us about this recent hack.
Okay.
And no, don't tell us who it is. If everybody wants to
Sure.
know who the hack is,
They
they'll tell
can
you
reach
later.
out. They can reach out to me privately. So there was a very large recent hack of a very large cloud-based IAM provider, and they were hacked. And what happened was it was almost like it was a social engineering hack, first of all. So I want to preface it by saying that. And they outsource their support to a third party company, and that company was socially engineered as a legitimate user, and they got in that way. That wouldn't happen with us because, one, we don't outsource our engineering, but even if we did, you would have to prove yourself to that customer support individual through the use of our Resilient ID. He would say, okay, I'm going to require a selfie. I've got the system. You've got to authenticate in to prove it. As a result, 5 million plus end users PII was exposed. And again, we don't collect raw or store raw PII, none of it. They were hacked using RDP. Again, going to the first point, through that third-party engineer, support engineer computer, which is kind of surprising because that's been a notoriously not unsecured protocol. And then the group that did it was Lapsus. And once they got in, they created a backdoor in this ID provider's environment. Now they found out, they owned up to it, and remains to be seen what corrections are being made. But we don't publish our back end admin console. It's you as a customer would get at, but again, you would only get access to it after being positively authenticated using our system, which requires a selfie being taken.
And that's the biggest thing is making sure that's the liveness test.
And that's the liveness, the bias, mitigation, everything.
Everything's baked into it. And what is this MLA, MFA thing? What's that mean?
Charlie, do you want to talk to this?
So the MLA is multi-level authorization. This is a capability within Resiliant to be able to provide an organization the ability to have a second level or even a third level of approval after the person's been accessed, has been allowed in, but there may be additional hurdles for that individual to be able to gain access to a particular area, access to specific different applications within the organization. And I should say that Resilient ID is also capable of being able to provide through the use of a QR code, physical access into systems.
Doesn't someone asked, does MLA go against the whole, I think you meant to say zero trust theory?
Yeah.
No, because zero trust is, we are performing all that strong activity on the front end before somebody is allowed in. They may be able to gain access into further systems if necessary, but that can be provided at a secondary level of authorization. It just means that individual, the Resilient ID, is going to be able to ensure that the proper individual is allowed access into the system. There may be an individual who has responsibility for a particular application that only wants certain individuals to be able to come in or
get approved, pre-approved to gain access. So it's an extra layer.
Yep. And Kathy's asking, what happens if the person has lost weight, had plastic surgery, been defaced by an accident, and their selfie no longer matches their driver's license or passport and is rejected from the system, but they're legit?
That's easy. What they could do is very quickly re-onboard, and that could be done in less than 30 seconds. And then they would get a new a new ID and FT or credential or hash, whatever you choose to call it. And that would be in that private blockchain, and they'd be good to go.
And William's asking the big question when it deals with government systems: is this system authorized by FedRAMP?
We are not currently FedRAMP authorized. That is something we are in the process of pursuing. And stay tuned.
Stay tuned, because it's coming.
Yeah.
And also, FedRAMP is a portion of that. And anybody that's dealt with FedRAMP and implementation of systems, that's one part of it. The other part is making sure that it's implemented within your agency. We work with a lot of different organizations that have gotten FedRAMP certified, so we know that it's coming. And if you're interested in assisting in that, because a lot of times if you have a burning issue, FedRAMP happens easier. So there you go. So let's make sure the independent testing, this is how it's done right, and that's because why?
Yeah, this is, we've been talking about this throughout the entire presentation, but it really comes down to you're only as good as somebody, a certified organization, certainly certified by NIST, a certification lab being able to deal with biometrics. That you've been able to pass their stringent testing capabilities. We've been passed by both iBeta labs, passed both level 1 and level 2 of their presentation attack detection analysis, as well as Bixi Labs, another NIST accredited biometrics testing laboratory. And they've tested specifically for facial liveness bias testing, and confirmed that our product exhibited fairness in terms of bias for target demographic groups, including gender, age, and race. Within the iBeta labs, we were tested for liveness, and they performed over 1,500 different types of attacks, presentation attacks, and they had a success rate of 0%. Resiliant earned an attack presentation certification error rate of 0%, or APCER, and reached level 2 compliance in accordance with the ISO IEC 30107-3. So we have taken our product, we've had other organizations, certified labs, evaluate the ability of our software to be able to provide the highest level of
Testing.
best level of biased, non-biased capability, as well as ensuring the liveness of the individual in front of the camera at that time.
And this kind of
I'd add to what Charles said, is that those are the only two that we're aware of, two NIST certified biometric testing labs. And we are, to my knowledge, we're the only ones that pass through both labs.
And I think that's critical. And the fact that this is newer technology is why it's important that you run it through your internal systems.
Oh yeah.
And give it and try it, because this is what literally what the president's asking for, to make sure that you have zero trust, as well as ensuring that you're not injecting any of the biases, race, gender, age, all of those are accomplished here.
Absolutely.
And to your point, and I forget who asked that question from the SBA about if something happens, you have the ability to correct it, which in other instances you'll have a much more difficult time.
Yep.
So you want to talk to this a little bit? This just breaks it down, and we have that report for you guys to review as well.
Right.
But you can see right here, that's the kicker, right?
completely unbiased as it relates to age, gender, as well as race, ethnicity. As you can see on the right, the two graphs there, where we're breaking out Asian, Black, Caucasian, and Indian across the categories of adult female, adult male, senior male, young female, young male. The results from that bar going low to high, from the bottom to the top of the PCER, which is, again, the bona fide presentation classification error rate, which was, if you wanted to read the text above.
And this means it makes it's harder for it to manage, or normally?
It's, if you achieve that high level, that means you're not doing a good job in being able to detect properly, or there's a bias. There's a higher bias level there.
Right.
The lower level that you have, is the lower bias capability. So our results that in the lower right-hand corner there on that graph, we're 0.0008 versus the standard benchmark test to be able to be acceptable.
Gotcha.
0.002.
So we're well below
much
that.
lower on age, much, half on gender, and certainly below on race, ethnicity. Excuse me.
It's a tough one.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, ethnic.
And so this is the benchmark, and this is your result, right?
That is correct.
Right.
Excellent.
And those benchmarks, by the way, give you a 95% confidence level. So we're way, we came in way under those numbers. So we were much higher than a 95% confidence level.
I love it. And so let's talk about this. And we got a couple of examples. And then if you guys have to jump, we'll make sure you get a copy of the recording, because I know we have a hard stop in just a minute for you guys. So take us through this real quick, and we'll get people out of here.
So Homeland Security had a requirement. They were the first ones. They gave us a small grant to develop this system years ago, and we've been fine-tuning it and working with them for a end-to-end zero trust with a very strong ICAM component at the front end. And we were happy to work with them on that. And as a result, if you go, we developed our solution for them. And if you go to the next slide, one of the first applications that they had in mind for the utilization of that is at Texas A&M. There's something called Disaster City.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's one of the best places ever. I got a VIP tour of that joint, and it is awesome.
Yeah, they simulate every disaster, man-made,
it is the coolest place.
Man-made and natural. I don't know how many miles it is, but there's everything from train wrecks to airplane crashes to bombings and you name it.
Hurricanes.
It's hurricanes. And
they bury the students so that the dogs can go sniff out the students. It's fantastic. You get to bury the students in concrete.
And the problem that Homeland Security had specifically with first responders, because that's what this was for, was that a disaster occurs, an incident manager is tasked to handle the disaster, and you get all these incident responders pouring in from all over the nation, and he has no, or she has no idea if it's a real incident responder. Are they credentialed? What are they able to do? Are they who they say they are? And our solution was deployed to solve that problem, so that the incident commander could say, yep, that's Charles Ambuel. He is from Connecticut. He is a firefighter as well as a welder, level 5, and he could deploy him on a natural disaster very quickly.
Which is a big deal, right? Because
because there's a ton of fraud that occurs, believe it or not, in these natural disasters.
Unbelievable amount. Which
is a shame, but it happens.
And anytime you have money flowing and you have
Yep.
and you have urgency, you have a potential problem, and I love it. So we're going to ask this question. We're going to continue the conversation. If you want a presentation for your team or test run, whatever it is that you'd like to, if you'd like to be included in the next briefing, that's cool. And then if you need help meeting the president's memorandum, that's what we're here for anyway.
And we're offering a free demo on our system. It's a closed system. It's not like, you're going to be able to stand up your own application. And if you email us, we'll set you up with a credential. You could go to the App Store, the Google, the Apple Store or Google Play, download the app. It's free. And you can play with this until your heart's content.
Yep. And here's the email right here. If you'd like to continue the dialogue, you can certainly do that. D Morris of Resiliant with an A.com. And there's several folks that want to continue the conversation with you guys. I think
We'd love to do it.
It is so important, folks, to take a look at every different angle you can possibly use to solve this problem. But the fact that these guys have the certifications that they do have, we know that FedRAMP is an issue, certainly for everybody that's on this, for making sure if it's going to be hosted in the cloud or it's going to be on your prem, you're going to have to skin that cat. But suffice it to say that is in the works, right, guys?
Yeah, we're going through FedRAMP. Not only are we going through FedRAMP, but we've got a lot of certain federal agencies have their preferred system integrators, if you will, and they've got the FedRAMP certification and authorization. We kind of will hoping to ride along with that, but we know that we're going to have to do it ourselves too. So we're going to skin the cat on both sides.
You got to do it, and you know it. So it's going to happen, and it's an urgent enough issue. So for the folks, you'll get a recap email by the end of the day. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You have all the pieces that are there. We just want to say thank you very much for you guys joining us. We know you have plenty of things that you get to be able to do. And we just really appreciate your feedback and your insight. Like I said, there's three different agencies already that want to continue the conversation. I'm sure that's going to increase as we have a whole bunch of folks that wanted to get a recording of this anyway. So appreciate you guys. Great job. And I know it's always a challenge in trying to get a complicated solution across to people, especially since some of the folks are not all that technically engaged, but they still need to solve the problem, right, guys?
Yeah, and we try to make it as easy and frictionless as possible.
Right.
Yep. And kudos to you guys for what you've done and your
Thank you.
And your IP. It makes it easy. And there was a question earlier about a justification of approval, or Joe Fock, that if you need any justification approval language for your contracting folks, or to be able to do the proprietary information, I'm sure that they can help you with that as well. And Kathy says, great presentation. You can come back, Kathy, just because you're so nice. Happy holidays to everybody. Abtab, awesome. Raymond, appreciate you guys. And feel free to reach out. And we know it's going to go back gangbusters starting in January. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, guys.
Thank you.